you want to introduce yourself, Chris? We can get started.
Sure. Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me or only possibly just know me through various writings or other things, my name is Chris Forty. I'm the head coach of the Dashing Whippets. I've been coaching the team for 6 years now, I think. Trying to do math, the pandemic blurred all that. And yeah, so I've been coaching the team for 6 years now, and originally from the Boston area, ranked competitively in college, NCAA Division III, and has been running pretty much for the last 30 years, on or off, mostly on, and currently reside on Staten Island.
Amazing. Okay, thanks, Chris. I'm Kristen. You'll probably hear enough about me, so I don't think we need to say too much right now. We can just go to the next slide.
Sure.
Yes, the next slide is a quote. I love starting out with a quote. This is from a pretty good book if you're like a super running nerd, from Advanced Marathoning. I just let two people in. I like this quote. It says, "It's been said that you can't run another marathon until you've forgotten the last one. If that's so, a lot of runners out there have short memories." So one of the things that is discussed in this book on marathoning and marathon training plans and marathon training in general is that this has become more and more regular, in that a lot more people are doing multiple marathons, even some at the elite level, which used to be completely unheard of. Like you would never have an elite run 2 marathons in the fall. It just wouldn't happen, because the theory was it was too risky, and injury wise it wasn't worth it, and you weren't going to get your best performance, and all of these reasons, and so it just wasn't done for the most part. And that notion is still prevalent, and I think it's still largely true, but there are exceptions, and there are people that especially on the amateur level, recreational level, that love to do multiple marathons. There's a whole club devoted to it, Marathon Maniacs. And so anyway, this is what we're going to talk about. And I assume that the reason you guys are here is because you are going to do multiple marathons yourself, or you're entertaining the notion of doing it in the future. Next slide. This is about me. As I said, you'll hear a lot of my stories anyway. But this little, the diagram here below just shows you how many times I've done this. So it's been 4 times over the last 4 years. I did, starting in 2018, I did 2 races in 10 weeks. Then 2019, I did 3 races in 7 weeks. 2020, I did 2 races in 6 weeks. And then, because I just love to be crazy, in 2021, I did 4 races in 10 weeks. And but before that, I did 3 races in 5 weeks. So that was tough. I learned a lot of things during doing that. And so that's sort of the basis of this. The closest I ever did 2 races was last year. I did London and Boston 8 days apart. And then the other second closest time was in 2019. I did 2 races 16 days apart. So those, if you have something like that close and that compressed, we can sidebar how to do that, because that's sort of a different beast. And so I'm not going to really get into that, because as I said, that's sort of, in my mind, bordering on like training for an ultra and recovering and approaching it as an ultra, really, because they're so close together. But so for the most part, we're going to deal with things that the majority of people in this group, I suspect, are doing, which is something more like a Chicago, a New York, a Berlin, New York, because we're mostly New Yorkers here in this group. And so we're generally combining things that are something more in line with like 4 weeks apart, 5 weeks apart, something like that. Okay, next slide. This is just the outline of what we're gonna cover. These are just broad categories, but as I said, the last thing that we're gonna do is a Q&A. And if you have questions that you think of as we're going along, please do just write them in the chat. Like if you're afraid that you're gonna forget it, feel free to write it in the chat and we'll come back to it at the end. I'm kind of just gonna flow through this, and then when I get to the end, I'll try to, I can answer anything like that. But if I stop, I don't want to be stopping a lot in the middle. So this is just how we're going to go through. Okay, next. Great. So this is my, if I had to put things in a nutshell, this would be the nutshell. In that as it says here, train for it. Train for what you're doing, right? This is the whole reason that we train. If the better your training is, the better your recovery will be, right? So that's true across the board. If you're doing one marathon, if you're doing one 5K, it doesn't matter what the way that you can best prepare yourself, the way that you can do the race and then bounce back quickly after, is by putting your focus and good quality training in on the front end, right? So that'll pay you back dividends on the back end. The other thing that I say here, which I've certainly found to be true, is that you gain a lot from years of experience. The more times you've done the marathon, the more your body is used to that distance, used to 26.2 miles. That doesn't make it easy. It's, it hasn't gotten to the point where it's like, hey, this is like a walk in the park, but your body becomes accustomed to what demands that distance requires, right? So that's one thing that, you can't skip, you can't buy that at the store, but if you've had prior marathoning experience, know that will benefit you going forward. And then the other thing I say, there's a lot of people coming in right now. Okay, the other thing that I say is that unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side of this equation you're on, those who are faster, those who benefit from not having to spend as much time getting the miles or getting the distance in, benefit from having more time for recovery, but B, also their training time is sort of maximized in a way that those who are on the other end of the equation don't really have the benefit of. Now, there's not as much that you could, again, this is not something that you can necessarily change. But what you can do is you can know how that affects you, right? So the other thing that I'll say here, and I will repeat it over and over, is I talk about a lot of this in hours. And the reason that I do hours or time is because your body does not know what a mile is. Your body knows time, and it knows stress, and it knows level of stress and equated over time. So the reason, it's good to think about miles. And when you're thinking about training, obviously a marathon is 26.2 miles. Everybody's covering that same distance, right? But some people are covering it in 3 hours. Some people are covering it in 5 hours. And so that amount of time equates to a different level of stress or strain, right? And then, but the also the flip side of that is that training can, be equated to time and encompass many different things. So, you don't necessarily have to just run to be training. You can also bike, Peloton, swim, just walking, hiking, all of these different things can also benefit you towards training time. Next. Great. So in the planning stage, number one thing in the planning stage is to consider what you want out of this marathon season, right? So I recommend thinking in advance. Unfortunately, at this point, most of us are already well into training, but have an idea of what race you want to race. Know that you cannot race every single race and have a PR every single race when they're very close together. And so you want to consider, okay, what gives me the best chance of success? Now, whatever your success is defined as, right? You may not be going for a PR at all. Okay, that's totally fine. You may just want to finish all of these races and experience all of these races, but you want to do it injury-free, I hope. And so that is its own goal, and you would approach it in a different way, but in a specific way, right? So certainly consider all of the factors at play. One thing that I also like to say and make sure that people take into consideration is the course and conditions and travel familiarity, because all of these things play a role, right? And you may not think of it on the surface. You may just look at, hey, the elevation map looks like this. Okay, cool. And that is certainly a big factor. But travel, for someone like me and like most of you, we will travel to sometimes very far away, multiple time zones away. And so how does that impact your race? How does that impact your stress level, your recovery level? And how much is that going to impact your race day? Because sometimes, especially when we're doing multiple races back to back and they're close together and we're like trying to get, beg for vacation time and all of these things, you may not be able to set yourself up for the best super successful day, where you may be like flying on the red eye, cramming in the expo, and then, barely getting maybe one full night's sleep before you have to get up and race. And, 5 time zones over, where it feels like you're racing at 3 a.m. for your body clock, right? So these are things you want to just think about, weigh that factor, weigh all of these different things, and know how that's, have in your mind that it's going to impact you, right? And then use these different factors to determine what your goals are, and then how you approach training. So that's sort of step one. What do you want to do at each of these races? Step two, how much time do you have in between these races? You should calculate it. Don't be like, well, I think it's roughly, no, I'm serious. Sit down, put it on pencil and paper, count those days on the calendar, because that is what is going to determine what you do in between. And it should really sort of determine, how you go about those races as well. So for instance, going back to when I had 2 races 8 days apart, there was no notion in my head at any point of like, well, I'm going to try to race and PR that second race that is 8 days after the first. That would be, I don't want to say impossible, but near impossible. Don't set yourself up for something that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So know how many days things are apart, know how many weeks you have in between, and use that also to set what your goals and priorities are. The first, the number one overarching priority is to get to the start line healthy. I want everybody to be able to do all of these races that they've signed up for in pain-free, right? Without setbacks, without injury, without like, having to figure out some crazy, notion of modifying their running. So in the best way possible, make sure that you keep that in your head at the forefront at all times. In terms of the weeks between, I'm going to show you a diagram and we're going to go into more with more detail. But after you complete a marathon, the first thing you have to do is recover. That is the first thing. You cannot do any other steps before you do that. That is, if you can't skip it, right? So recover first. Second would be to maintain fitness. And then the third, if you have enough time in between, and this totally depends on the timeline, then you can do some building back up in between. But again, this is determined by the schedule and number of weeks in between. Next slide. Great. So this goes over again what I was saying about the weeks and counting and how much time is in between. So just so we're not we're sort of dealing, as I said, in generalities, but in general, a marathon taper that's leading into the marathon is 2 to 3 weeks. This does vary somewhat, but overall 2 to 3 weeks. A reverse taper or the marathon recovery phase, these both happen after the race and can be used interchangeably. That is also 2 to 3 weeks long. The time to change fitness, I put this in here for those who are thinking about, oh, I'm going to do all this building in between or whatever. Think about the time in between. It's 3 to 4 weeks to build fitness, right? To have a change in fitness, and it's on a delay, right? So if I go out and I do a super awesome interval workout tomorrow, I am not experiencing that fitness tomorrow or the day after or even the week after. It takes time. Your body has to change and adapt, and we're going to go into that in more detail. But know that this thing that you're doing right now is not going to help you right now. It's going to help you later on in terms of increasing your fitness. I I put the little time machine here. I've probably dated myself. This is from Back to the Future.
The DeLorean's a nice touch. The DeLorean's a nice touch.
For those who are
there's a bunch of people Googling right now what
they don't know what this this is from a movie. But the point of that is to say that you can't jump around, right? You can't say, well, I just want to recover faster. So or I just want to like increase my fitness faster, right? It's not possible unless you have a time machine. If you have a time machine, cool, you're all good. Otherwise, you have to really go by these guidelines. The other thing that I say here is respect the taper, right? You're not going to help yourself by skipping. You're not going to help your marathon by saying, oh, I don't need that. I don't need that taper. You need the taper. You will help yourself by giving yourself the taper. Doesn't matter what state you're in. And this little stat here, just in case you're curious, there's a lot of data that backs it up, but up to a 5.6% performance increase from taking a taper prior to race day. And really you should taper before every PR race you want to do, every race that you want to race, but particularly for a marathon where you're going to be out there for multiple hours and it's about endurance, you need to be rested. That's the benefit of the taper. Okay, next. Great. I'm not, this is a lot. What I will say is that as much as you can build up, and again, as much as you can make your training quality specific training for the distance and the goal that you're trying to attempt, the better off you will be. One of the things that I will say that I'll just put a little note star is that if you are training for multiple marathons, one thing I really do recommend is running around your long run day, right? So if your long run is on Saturday, try to do a recovery run on Sunday or go out for an easy run on Friday. Now, you want to be cautious with this, right? Don't go out and say for the, like, if you usually have a day off on both either side of your long run, please don't go out and go like, I'm going to do an 8-miler now. You got to like, you need to start gradually, and it's bit by bit, right? So if you're going to go out the next day, just start with 3 or 4 miles, something easy, something simple like that. And, then you can grow it from there. But what you don't want to do is put too much stress on your body all at once. But in terms of teaching your body to recover and bounce back after a long distance, like a 26.2, it is good practice to use the long run in training as like a simulated marathon distance because it's longer. And then use the next day or the day, as I said, or the day prior as a sort of a way to get back in, way to force your legs to sort of keep going, right? So this is about building endurance, muscular endurance, and it will help you when you get to the marathon and then you're looking at racing another or doing another marathon a couple of weeks later, if you can sort of bounce back from these longer, harder efforts quickly.
Can I jump in here for
Yes.
a quick second?
Yes, you can.
So on that point, one of the things that when coaching marathoners that I usually recommend, so we talked about the 2 to 3 week taper. So let's remove that from your race. When you go backwards from there, essentially from weeks 8 to week 3, if you're counting down to race day, I often recommend athletes try to run a marathon a weekend between the 2 days. That between the 2 days of running, whether to Kristen's point, if you're doing a long run on Saturday, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or Friday plus Saturday, if you do your long run on Saturday, then it's on Sunday, then you're likely looking at adding Saturday and Sunday together, but try to shoot for somewhere close to a marathon from weeks 8 to weeks 3 as you count down towards race week. And it doesn't, can it be 25? Yes. Maybe there might be a weekend where that number goes to 27 or 28, and that's great. But I think that's try to shoot for like a marathon a weekend as you get into that period of training.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Great. So I'm going to jump then to this next category because this is super important. I want to talk about it a good amount. Running is catabolic, and I explain what catabolic is right here. It in a nutshell, breaking down, right? So most especially when you run a distance like a marathon, there is quite a bit of catabolism in that you have micro tears in your muscles, your tendons have been strained, your immune system can even take a hit. So you may finish a marathon and have run it super, easy, relaxed, whatever. It doesn't matter. Your body has still gone through a breaking down. And so you need to be aware of this when you're, in those days after. One thing that I like to also note here, after you've done a marathon distance, again, even if you're doing it easy, your glycogen stores are low. What is glycogen? Glycogen is what is the fuel, is the energy that powers your running. And it's basically what allows you to keep going. So your glycogen stores are low, that hopefully you fueled as you're racing. And so they're not completely empty, but they're very low. Dehydration, you can drink all along the race as you go. Please do. I hope you are. But you're still going to finish somewhat dehydrated. Why? Because you are losing energy, you are losing fluids as you are running, and you cannot replace them at the same rate as you're losing them, right? Particularly for a long distance race like a marathon. So know that when you're done, this is the state you are in. It doesn't matter if you've taken it super relaxed. Unless you stopped and had lunch along the course or whatever, like you're still ending in a deficit, okay? So anabolic, what does anabolic mean? That means building up. In order for your body to recover and build up from this breaking down phase, you need energy, and you need that comes in the form of food and drink. So it's super important, super important to take in things as you go. Hopefully you've fueled really well leading into race day, and you're starting with your glycogen stores all completely full, all the way filled up, and hopefully you're replenishing as you go along. Just as important, as soon as you finish that marathon, and this also ties in with the long run, keep these things in mind as you're doing your long runs too. Try to start replenishing as soon as you finish. Why? Because that allows your body to begin the recovery process, the repair process. Next slide. So we're gonna get into this nutrition thing a little bit, because it really goes hand in hand. So as I was saying, you're ending in a deficit. Your body cannot begin to recover or rebuild until you've given it the tools, the nutrients to do that rebuilding. So this is why it is very important again. And I say here, the recommendation has been for a long time, to start to, refuel within 30 minutes. They've since found like, oh, well, you can just, do it over the course of a day. And yes, that is true. But again, you're delaying your recovery. So if you can get it in sooner, if you can start fueling up your body, restocking your glycogen stores, rehydrating, protein and carbohydrates, especially, all of these things will help you, again, bounce back faster, keep going, and be ready to go like in the next day and the next weeks. There's some numbers and stats, and you can read it on your own. Next.
Real quick to piggyback on two things you mentioned.
Yes.
One of the most difficult things to do when running or when finishing a race is the desire to want to eat food, right? Your stomach naturally stops itself from that process while you're running. Once you get beyond the 60 to 75 minute mark, it really starts to, you no longer really get hungry. So it is one of those things that as you're, doing the slow walk of death that many of these major marathons have after you cross the finish line, you're often walking a half mile when the race is over. Like, try to just start putting anything you can in your mouth if you can push it down. And then the second thing is that I think is actually really important is about like kind of the recovery and your immune system. I mean, you will be running in the fall, and the weather will start to change and your body will change along with that. And your immune system will be significantly compromised after the race is over. I mean, Kristen, how many athletes do we know that you talk to that have a head colds 7 to 10 days after they've run a marathon? And it's not because it's cold and flu season. It's just your immune system is so compromised from everything you've pushed it through in a marathon. So anything you can do, again, that's sleep, I think is important, and other sort of, the vitamin C things, if you like the emergencies and things along that line, will really help keep your immune system strong, particularly if you're going to race another marathon in a period of time afterward, that now you're going to have to overcome a head cold as well, potentially. So try to minimize that. Right, now I'll move on for you. Sorry.
Hey, no, that's good. That's all good. Great. So this is just showing a little bit about why recovery is so important. So the value of recovery should not be overlooked. This is just for training in general, just period training in general. But there's these two pictures here. There is damage that occurs from stress defined in exercise form, which is running for our purposes. And so your body then needs to address that. And when it does address it, it builds back stronger. So this is called supercompensation. That's sort of the technical term. And so you can see from that graph there that with recovery comes supercompensation, and then your baseline is increased, right? So what you could handle before, a month ago, say, is not the same as what you can handle now. Your body has adapted and has compensated and grown stronger, right? So this is why you don't want to overlook recovery, but this is also the benefit of stacking training up, stacking successful weeks up. All of these things lead to, a new baseline, right? You're stronger overall, you're more fit overall, you can handle more overall. This is why it's important, again, to really put quality effort into your training on the front end. Again, it's going to help you on the back end. And my favorite thing, I say this all the time, stress plus rest equals success. You have to have these things in balance. You don't want to be too lopsided in either direction if you're really trying to go for peak performance. And overtraining is not good, right? It's a negative. So you don't have to try to one up everybody all the time. The goal is to really have these two things in balance. Balance is key. See, I have said it right there. Okay, next.
Nope, try it again. Here we go.
There we go. Okay, so now we're at race day. This is execution. We're talking about execution right here. This, I'm not going to say a whole lot about this, but know what you're going to do, have a plan, stick with the plan. One thing that I think people think sometimes for a marathon where they're like, oh, I'm just out to have fun, or, oh, I'm just going to take it easy. You still need a plan for that. You still need to know what paces you're going to aim for. Again, you don't have to get so, oh, it can be a range, right? You can say, oh, I'm going to start out at my easy run pace. What's your easy run pace? 8:30 a mile. Well, I'm going to start out 8:30 a mile. And then, around mile 20, I'll try to speed up or something. But you need to know what it is you're going to do, whether you're trying to just have fun or go easy or not. And it's totally fine to have a plan where you say, hey, I'm gonna see what the conditions are like, the day before, the day of. If there's a heat wave going through, or if there's another Boston 2018 sort of weather situation, you might want to change the plan. That's totally fine, but do think about what you're going to do, and then proceed accordingly. One thing that I really learned, I said this before, but running those three marathons in 5 weeks was so incredibly challenging from a mental point of view. I did not account for that really at all, like, because that was the first time I had really tried to do something like that tight together. And I just wasn't prepared for it. So do prepare your brain for what your body is going to have to do, right? And the other thing that I would say is I have never run a marathon where I didn't have some misery, struggle, desire to just, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing that? Like, it has occurred in every single marathon I've ever done. Even the one my fourth marathon last fall, I was a pacer, right? I was running my recovery pace the whole time. It was like not challenging in that way, but it still hurt. It still hurt at the end. Like, I got to mile 25 without too much discomfort, but from 25 to the end, I was like, ow, I don't want to do this anymore. So I've yet to, if someone's out there who's done a marathon where they were just like pleasant and, not uncomfortable for the entire race, I'd like to meet them. But I would say, expect, some misery for some portion of the race. Hopefully it's not too big of a portion of the race. And then the other thing on the mental side is that you may need to look for other things, right? Especially if you're not racing, if you're just like, hey, I'm out for a good time, you may need to devise other things to get you through the race. And so this is why I say this thing about outside distractions or pacers. Again, speaking as someone who has been a pacer, I love to distract runners. I will tell the stupidest jokes to make you laugh. And that's something that I really enjoy doing. And part of my job out there is to engage you. So if you think you might be in a position where you're like, I don't know if I'm feeling a little tired, I'm feeling a little ambivalent about doing this, and I just want to do it to finish, go find a pacer, and make them your best friend, because that will help. The other things, as I say here, make a kick-ass playlist for yourself, interact with the spectators.
I have 5 little children.
I will say, so Boston, which I did 8 days after London, the only way I got through that race, the only way I got through Boston that time, was the spectators. I have never, like, I high-fived every single one. I was like yelling like a lunatic, like I literally needed them for my survival. And thankfully it was Boston, and they were way more than they were half drunk, and it was like great. It was perfect. So it worked out. But use what you have. Go seek these things out if you're going to be in a situation where it's like, I just kind of got to get through this, right? And you're not trying to PR and all of these things. Next.
There we go. Why? Yes, no, recovery slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now we're on to the race is over. We're on to the recovery phase. You've done one race, or you've done, 2 races at this point. Recovery is always the next phase. Race, then recovery, period. I like this little, I'll say it, I just say it like 1,000 times. Listen to your body. Listen to your body. You have to listen to your body. I'm sorry. I am a coach, and I am coaching some of you. I don't know what your body's saying to you. I'm sorry. I don't have that mind reading capability. So, I can guide you and I can help you, but I cannot explain, I can't necessarily tell you how quickly your body's going to bounce back after the marathon. I can't. And you, even, if you've done 10 marathons or you've done 20 marathons, your body is not necessarily going to always react in the same way to the distance, because again, there's all of these other factors at play. So know that you have to sort of do a little bit of like investigation, a little bit of testing things out a little bit, just in terms of how do I feel? Ask yourself, how do I feel? What do I feel like doing? I go through all of these recovery measures. Sleep. I will say it 1,000 times. Please sleep. It's super important. It's super important going into the race. It's super important going out of the race. It's super important all the time. Do not overlook that, because sleep is one of those great recovery things. It's free. Just do it. You can do all of these other things. You can buy the super fancy, foam rollers. I have the Normatec recovery boots. I love them. I'm like a big believer, but again, they do not replace the basics. The basics are sleep well, eat well, hydrate, right? One of my top tips for marathoning is to go for a walk the same day of the race, later that night, right? It sounds like it's not anything that I ever want to do, but I believe fully in it, in using that tool as a way to help me get back faster. The reason is your post-race, like most races, but especially the marathon, you are so stiff, you've been through so much, and everything, you turn into like, the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz. That is your body. It just like has calcified. And so if you can like take some hours, don't, hang out with your friends, eat good food, celebrate, show off your medal, take pictures, all of these things, relax, take a shower, but then nap, all of these things. But then later that evening, if you can, force yourself to go for just like a 30-minute walk. It's like a hobble. I do recommend it. I find it to be really beneficial. Get the blood flowing. That's the only idea. Just get the blood flowing. And that's
do that in training too.
Yes.
If like try to, during the course of your training, on your Saturday or Sunday long run, whatever the day you do it, do all it should mirror your, again, race day should mirror what you've done during training. So if you go out for, you finish, you have brunch with your friends, or you go home and take a nap, go out for a walk later. Those of you who have a dog probably have a built-in excuse, but those of you who don't, find a reason to go out for a walk later in the day, and do that even during your training, not just on race day.
That's right. 100%. Next slide.
I love the photo of all the torture devices, by the way. That's a nice touch. Nice touch.
I like those. I mean, there's options here.
Yeah.
Okay, so return to running. Again, the man, the thing, the little picture. Listen to your body. You have to listen to your body. A lot of people, when they finish the race and they have another race and they have another marathon coming up, do proceed with this notion of reverse taper. That's sort of the terminology that's come about. I think it's a pretty good way to describe it. This phase again is about 2 to 3 weeks. The idea of the reverse taper is exactly as it sounds. You sort of gradually, it's a gradual ramp up. And depending on how you're feeling after the race, it may be really super gradual. And that's okay. I do not recommend trying to like hammer any kind of, I don't go by any numbers at all, period. No numbers. No pace numbers, no mileage numbers, no time numbers, no day numbers, none of that. You just go out, try to move a little bit, see how your body's feeling, see how your body's reacting. I will tell you what happens to me. I'll tell you what happens to me. So I've been doing, I run 7 days a week. I've been doing a run streak for some time now. So I am a crazy person and I go out and run the next day after the marathon, but it's literally like 2 miles, and it is the slowest, most painful 2 miles of my entire life every single time. And that's okay. And then again, I build up every single day. You don't have to do this, but the point of what I'm saying is every single day I go a little bit longer, and every single day my legs feel a little bit better. And every single day my pace comes down slightly, naturally, not from me pushing anything, not from me trying to hit anything. It just happens naturally, right? These are slight little things. I'm not talking about, 30 seconds. I'm talking like, oh, I went 5 seconds better, the next day. And I went an extra, 10 minutes the next day and it felt okay. These are things that I'm talking about, but small gains. And again, I let my body indicate that it's okay. And so I would recommend everyone use that staple to sort of proceed through this phase. It's a very delicate phase because, as I said in the beginning, your body's pretty primed for injury, right? It's very easy. It would be very easy to have something bad go, bad happen because just the state that your body is in after the race. And so you don't want to rush things. And so, if you need to walk, it's okay. As runners, I know we're like, I'm a runner. And this idea of walking is somehow, it's like a bad word or something. It's actually okay, promise. In the recovery phase, especially, it's okay. And so go out for a walk, do a walk run if you need to. Be careful with speed work. If you do speed work at all, just be careful with it. There's, as I say here, risk versus reward. There's not a lot of reward in this phase to doing much of any speed work at all. And so just consider that as you're in this phase. Past the recovery phase, past the reverse taper, these are for people who have something more like 10 weeks between. If you have 10 weeks from marathon 1 to marathon 2, then you can do some of these other things where you do get back into the speed work in a more sort of serious way. I recommend starting out your first taste of speed work. I recommend that being strides. If you're not familiar with strides, I have there's a little description here or a little image here. These are really short, 20 seconds or 100 meters is usually what people use. And the recovery is long. So the goal, the effort here is like you're hitting max effort, but for a teeny short period of time. You ease in, you ease out, and then you recover. You just stand there and you recover. It's a good way to sort of, again, just sort of like get the things moving, see how it feels, see how it, how your body is responding to it. And it's just a taste of speed and it goes a long way. So don't be afraid to start with those and do those. I would put them in a couple of times a week first, 2 or 3 times a week. And then the next week you can look at doing a little more organized, longer speed work intervals and that kind of thing. But again, recovery is the most important thing. And if your body's saying, ow, this is hurting, or ow, this is really uncomfortable, and you're not feeling it and your legs do not feel back to where they were before the race, they'll tell you that. Your legs will tell you that. Please don't push anything.
as someone who's not a run streaker, so you lunatics, I never understand you people. The advice I like to get now, yes, you may finish one race and now your head immediately turns around to, okay, I have another race in X number of weeks. Usually the advice I like to give post marathon, post first marathon of a season is don't run again until you actually kind of miss it. I think oftentimes, you can go 2-3 days without running at all, or even 4 days. It could be, most marathons in this case are on Sundays. Oftentimes many people don't run until Wednesday, Thursday, or even Friday. You can't let the second one dictate your calendar of recovery. And again, Kristen brought up a good, like, go for walks, take a city bike or your own personal bike, and maybe just do a lap or two of Central Park if you live in Manhattan, Prospect Park if you live in Brooklyn, maybe the Brooklyn waterfront if you live in South Brooklyn, places like that, just to try to, ease the legs into any sort of movement. But, it's okay to not like force yourself to run immediately after one race is over.
I agree with that completely. Yeah.
You don't
have to be me. Don't be me. It's okay. But a good tip or a good sort of way to approach it is, what did you do in training, right? So the difference for me is, like, I train 7 days a week, so it doesn't feel that weird for me to continue that sort of cycle. If, however, you're a person where you run 3 days a week or 4 days a week, like normal human beings, not weirdos like me, then again, why would you post race, you wouldn't do something super crazy and like try to go and do more than what you did in training? That doesn't make sense, right? And so there should be no reason to, as Chris said, hurry back. You don't need to hurry back. Take cues from your body, but also know that, as it says here, recovery is the first priority. So that's number one, overarching. Next slide. I think we're at.
Why does the click not?
Okay. We're at Q&A.
All right. So yes, we have several questions have come across.
All right.
I'm not going to ask them in the order they were submitted, but I will ask them in the order kind of on a timeline basis. So in terms of where you would be. So I just think that might be a better flow of the questions. So by the way, you included a team photo that you're not even in the picture. Like, you couldn't find one team photo that you're not in.
I just use the same one. I don't change it. The pictures are the same.
All right. So again, I will jump out of order for people who did post questions, just because I want to put them in the order at which they would be most appropriate. So looking at kind of the kind of peak training. So when you're in peak training leading into your first marathon, should your legs ever feel fresh or good?
In peak training? Oh, yeah. I don't think so. No.
Agreed. I know. I wanted to immediately write hard no, but I was like, I'll say this with the Q&A.
I mean, I would say if so, you're not really marathon training, or else you're just like some incredible beast of a runner. But then you're probably not hitting your biggest potential. I mean, the purpose of peak training, and one of the things that you're trying to get out of the way that marathon training works, is building some fatigue in your legs, because you're not going out and training 26 miles ever, right? It's not like a 5K or a 10K where you can actually, hit these distances. And so the benefit really comes from, again, stacking days, stacking weeks, and you should be tired.
And into that, you may get a day of blissful running in that kind of period, but right. If you're expecting it on a regular basis, you don't hold out for that. Yeah.
Right.
So next question would be, again, kind of in order here of timing. During the recovery and taper phase, what are your recommendations? either more days off, more days of zone 2 running with fewer miles? What's the reduction in workload look like?
Well, okay, so I would take taper separately from the recovery phase. So taper, again, I will use myself, but I'll also say what like normal schedule people would do. So you want to keep your routine basically. So for me, again, because I run 7 days a week, I still run 7 days a week, but some of those days a week are literally like I'm doing 2 miles because the volume decreases, right? If you're a person who runs, 5 days a week, and then in taper, all of a sudden you go down to 3 days a week, it throws your body off, I found. And, for people I'm training and for like my old prior training self. I think it's good for ourselves mentally and also physically to keep a sort of routine. But for taper, you really, really want to decrease the volume, right? And so don't go out for like super long runs. Do prioritize rest. Just cut back. And so those weeks are a gradual cut back up until race day. For the recovery phase, again, I stress this again, but what feels normal to you? What feels natural? Again, this is sort of what Chris was saying before. What is your body telling you, right? If you have 3, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you don't feel like running, don't run, right? If that feels normal and natural to you, totally fine. Okay. I do recommend doing some walking, doing some easy yoga, doing some, easy cycling, I do recommend moving in some way, but that doesn't mean you have to run. So do what feels natural, do what feels like routine. But the recovery should really just be about getting your body back to its, what was the baseline? I'm going to try to get it back to that baseline. So again, don't stress about, having to hit certain paces or certain mileage or any of that stuff.
And I think so, to kind of clarify too, and I misrepresented Michael's questions. I'm sorry. It was more in the reverse, going back up. So that was my bad. But in that similar way, I think, like in Michael, you mentioned about like the zone 2. I think that what's going to happen is after a marathon, your resting heart rate is going to stay elevated for several days. So if you go out for an easy run a couple of days later, that heart rate may be higher than it was during the taper phase. So I'm a believer in the heart rate, and I think it's a good metric. I'm always cautious to like make it the only metric, because you may go out for the same 3 or 4 miles, 6 days after a marathon, and your heart rate is just naturally elevated versus the same 3 or 4 miles you did 6 days before the marathon. So I think kind of the zone 2, what I want to be careful of is you could get the same zone 2 just by going out for a bike ride, where you could just be in zone 3 on a run, because of where your body exists. So I'm not saying don't use heart rate as a metric. I do think it's important. Just please don't. I'm always cautious about making it the only metric in training. And then along those similar lines, so I'm going to then feed into the next question here, again in timing, which would be in the week after. Do you recommend skipping a long run in the first, after the first marathon, like the first week after?
I wouldn't really do long runs at all in between, unless excluding if they're like 10 weeks apart. Okay. But again, it's a gradual, so the recovery phase post marathon is a gradual ramp up. I mean, and it should really be like real gradual. So, by the second or third week, your long run is maybe 8 miles. you know, what's the, again, go back to what's the benefit? What's the training? You just ran a marathon. You don't need to go long again. Your body knows how to go long at that point. You know, if you have many, many, many weeks, then you can slow, you know, you can ramp it up, but you would need a lot of time. And again, you still have to taper into the second marathon. Keep this in mind as you're counting these weeks, right? If your marathon is 4 weeks after if your second marathon is 4 weeks after the first, all you have time in between that is for recovery, a recovery phase, and a taper back into the second race. That's it. There's no other weeks. Yeah. So again, they have to be really spread out to sort of get anything in there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the, you know, the kind of a traditional double for many people, right? Many people enter the lottery for both Chicago and New York, hoping they get into one, and then magically they get both. And now you're like, okay, so this is a thing, right? And that's how I think a lot of us, you know, kind of, you know, ended up on this call, right? In those, or Berlin and in New York, or et cetera, right? So when you look at particularly Chicago and New York, you know, there's only 4 weeks between. It's either 3 or 4. So kind of, right. So it's 4 weeks. So essentially, kind of to Kristen's point, a week later, you know, you may get to 8 miles. Bless you if you can get to 10. Like, bless you if you get to 10. And then the week later, you might get to 15. And then you're in the taper now for the next one. So you might do another 15, 16, and then another 10, and then you're back to racing New York. So I think that, you know, if you're looking to try to get to 20, like if you're thinking you're going to get to 20 between Chicago and New York, I really wouldn't recommend that. And I'm Chris, and I'm sure you're in the same boat there. Like, I don't expect that to be part of a plan. So in that same thing, a question was asked about, okay, what if there's only 2 weeks between your races? So what's your thought between 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks is just, it's very light running, and you know, all you can do in between those 2 is recover. That's it. There's just not time for anything. And the priority then should really just be about getting your legs back into you know, homeostasis, right? And so that's not going to come from hammering miles, or it's not going to come from, you know, putting any heavy paces in or anything like that. You should really be focusing on rest. You should focus on all of those recovery measures that we talked about. You know, get a massage if you can, you know, hit the foam roller every single day, those kinds of things. Your time would be better spent focusing on those things than trying to spend a lot of time running. You know, do go out and do a couple of, you know, it's like shakeout-y kind of things. But yeah, you don't need to, there's no real benefit to trying to do a lot in that block.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. So 2 more. So someone actually, Alyssa, I'll answer your question quick because it just popped in. Yes, we will post the recording of this once we're done. Yes. Question was, if you're traveling later in the day after the marathon. So this is probably, you know, I'm going to go out on a ledge here and assume, like most people, we don't have a ton of vacation days, and you're likely getting on a flight or you're getting on a train the evening of said marathon. So what are your recommendations if you have to travel that day? Because we talked about, you know, trying to go out for a walk or something later in the day. What are your thoughts for if you have to travel and you cannot do some of that?
Yeah. So I actually am an airport pacer on a good day anyway, but I do fully believe in airport pacing. No, because honestly, even on a regular, even just like regular running, regular training, I get very stiff if I have to like stay still or crunched up for too long. And so I will literally like be back and forth on the concourse. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, people look at you weird, but other than that, it's fine. You know, I will say again, I'm a big believer in compression for recovery. You know, that's not to, I don't think it's like a miracle cure or something or anything like that. But in terms of flying, I have compression pants that I wear for flying, and I think they help. And so that would be something that I would recommend. You know, try to do as much as you can before and after. Stand up on the plane, go for the aisle seat, you know, and you know, just do your best. Hopefully it's not a super long flight if you have to do that. I have done that. I've yes, many times. You know, fly to race, do race, get on plane, fly home. Yes.
And then I agree with all that. I got nothing to add to that one. And then this one is particularly during the race itself. And I think this is also a helpful question throughout training, because I think this is something that athletes should do during training, is how often do you take gels during a marathon? And that's that could go on for an endless conversation. That could be a presentation in and of itself, but we can happy to touch upon that. But I think this is something that, regardless of what your plan is and what, tips Kristen and I will give here to answer this question, these are things you want to be practicing like now, like
yes,
as you go along, to figure out what your digestive system is like and how it processes simple sugars like goos or Cliff Blocks, or was it hammer gels or Morton or whatever it is. So what are your thoughts on frequency there, Kristen?
Well, so this is a bit of a like pet project topic for me, because this is something that I have struggled with personally, and I have hired a sports dietitian to help me with this specific thing, because I have had trouble with it. And so I know what the recommendation is, and I am not very good at following it, but I'll tell you what it's supposed to be. What they say, 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour for efforts over 3 hours. It is tough to get that amount in. But you should really strive for that. So look at different products have different carb recommendation, or have different carb amounts. I'm sorry. I am a personal user of Morton, and I don't stomach gels well, so I have put together all kinds of crazy things. But Morton recently came out with this with a bar that is 40 grams of carbs, which is good, because again, you want to try. A lot of what you're trying to do is sort of like get in as many carbs as you can. And it's going to be hard because the race is long and your stomach is going to not want it. And this is part of why it's important to do this in training, because it can, again, your stomach is trainable, but it's also sensitive, right? So if you just throw a whole bunch of stuff at it that it's never had before, it's not going to be too happy. And so you have to work on it. You have to practice. And so find what works for you, and find what the formula that you can make the best of. And so I use the Morton drink, actually, that I carry in a handheld, because again, I don't stomach gels very well. And also, so they came out with this bar, which is 40 grams of carbs, which is awesome. Most gels have like 25 grams of carbs. And so that sort of has been a godsend to me. Lately, I've been using it in training. So, but again, there's like 1,000 different products on the market. What works for me and you is different, but 60 to 90 grams per hour, it's hard.
Yeah. And in a similar way, so for myself, I'm not a person who consumes caffeine on a regular basis. So also the amount of caffeine that can be in some of these gels can be tricky for some people, and can affect your digestive system as well. get using, sample set of one, and like myself personally, I use the traditional goo packets. I've never really had a problem with them. If you look at the writing on the package says 5 before the 45. Again, going back to the minutes, right? That, we talk a lot about training in minutes. So the idea is you're supposed to consume it about 5 minutes before every 45 minutes worth of running. For me, I don't consume a lot of caffeine in my diet. So I will often go with non-caffeinated gels through oftentimes through at least the first 30K. And then we'll switch to caffeinated gels for the last 12K, because I actually feel the caffeine in my system because I don't consume it on a regular basis. And then I think the other trick is, to Kristen's point, it can be very difficult to consume all of those carbs in an hour. As the race progresses, I go from consuming a whole gel in at one time to becoming a nibbler. So I will tear off the package and maybe just take a bite out of it and chase it with water at a water stop. And so I won't consume the whole gel. And then a lot of these major marathons, the next water stop is only a mile, mile and a half at most. We'll nibble a little bit more of it, chase it with some more water. So I become a nibbler and a sipper as the race progresses. I actually I consume big blocks early, and then I slowly decrease the amount I consume as the run progresses.
Yeah. Lots of good questions, though.
Yeah.
Is that all of them?
That is all of them. Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I didn't leave. I'm scrolling through the chat. Yes, I did not. Yeah, I did not. Oh, wrong way. That's not. All right. So crap. Stop moving my mouse. That's my problem. Stop using your mouse. Use your keypad. That's why. There we go. All right. We'll go to the end slide. Sorry.
Thank you. That's the end. No, seriously, thank you. So this is my email, like my personal email, and then this is the team email. If you're on the Whippets, and so that goes to all the coaches. Get that. If you want to contact Chris, you can go through that. And so, if you have specific questions, or if you're running Berlin, or you're running Chicago, and then you find yourself post race and you're like, I don't know what to do, you can certainly contact me later. You don't have to do it right now. But I'm here to help. If I am already coaching you personally, then we will together figure all of this out. And so you don't have to think about, everything that I've explained here. But if you're on the team and you have hopefully you're using our team plans, then you might need a little help in the in between. And so, reach out to us so that we can, give you some guidance on that. Chris, you have anything?
As your show, I'll let you sign.
No, that's all I feel.
I'm just here to moderate. I'm just here to.
I feel like I said enough.